Wow, everyone. I mean, that, Kevin Mitchell, that was spectacular. That's the first time I've seen that. I don't know where you got all that stuff, but it's just spectacular. My most heartfelt thanks to the Parnelli Board of Advisors, all the sponsors, and all the professionals here tonight. Thank you for the Audio Innovator Award. My most sincere thanks to Paul Anka for presenting me with this award. You know, I'm really proud to have worked for Paul for many decades, and I thank you, Ken Newman and Jan Landy and Kevin Mitchell and Terry Lowe for arranging this presentation by Paul. Working for Paul was one of the most formative jobs in my career. Paul, as you probably all know or can see, has very, very, very high standards. From Paul, I've used many of these standards the rest of my life. And one of these, he says, that's been very important to me. He says, if you at least do what you say you're going to do in life, that's a pretty simple concept. If you at least do what you say you're going to do,
stay in front of the podium.
You'd be way ahead of everyone else. Oh yeah, be right. Where's the mic? Okay. So, if you at least do what you say you're going to do, you're going to be way ahead of anybody else in life. So, the second thing Paul always said, let's see, something about the stakes are too high for amateurs. I don't know about the manager part there, but that was pretty good too, Paul. When you personally hand a great entertainer like Paul Anka's microphone, one thing, you better darn well know what good sound is, because Paul knows what good sound is, and you better produce it for him. Because of the years of working with Paul, I started A1 Audio in order to really do it my way. When I was notified tonight here that I was going to be honored and presented by Paul Anka, who was really my hero, it was an amazing, humbling experience for me. Jan Landy knows he was there. I started thinking about what highlights in my audio life I could tell you about that would best exemplify how I got here. But fortunately, Kevin Mitchell and his staff did this fantastic Front of House magazine article. They did this video, which is just over the top, and especially Paul Anka's rendition of My Way is just what makes this business so wonderful. I mean, I must have mixed Paul Anka My Way so many times, and then of course when Frank Sinatra was doing it, many, many times either as well. Frank Sinatra brought down the house in the Maracanã Stadium, as you saw there. That stadium had seated 175,000 people. You can imagine the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl, is 101,000 people. And we did, I think, Depeche Mode there and Thomas Dolby. And that filled up with 101,000 people. But if you take the Rose Bowl and you add a balcony all the way around it, okay, and then you consider that there are two moats. One moat between the audience and the track, and another moat between the track and the center field. And each moat is about 10 feet wide by 8 or 10 feet deep. And they're solid concrete, sheer, smooth walls. And there's just no way to get from the audience onto the center field. So when we had to do that show, it was pretty difficult because we couldn't even get the equipment, onto the field. So, those were just some of the interesting experiences that I got to in here. Vegas shows were really very different from the one-nighters. In Vegas, I typically mixed 2 shows a night for Paul and others, and 7 days a week, and we did it for 2 or 3 weeks straight. And in addition, sometimes we would do a show at 3 a.m. for the cab drivers and the swing shift employees, and they were really the best audiences of all. Thus, in a 3-week period, we often did 43 shows. We always had a full orchestra with a completely different relief orchestra every night, or 1 or 2 nights a week. And then we had the other nights with the regular orchestra. But of course, when you change an orchestra, everything changes in the sound. So performing in Vegas was always challenging because of the dry air. And many performers would get what was known as a Vegas throat. They would not be able to sing sometimes and occasionally have to cancel a show. So the last thing they needed was to fight the sound system. So if you didn't, again, have it right by the second show the first night, you might not even be around on the second night. So there's that phrase again, the stakes were too high for amateurs, as Paul used to say. In early 1972, I was invited by the Audio Engineering Society to present a technical white paper on tri and quad amplification in Munich, Germany at the AES convention. Now, to present a paper at the AES convention, you have to submit it in advance. So I was using bi and tri amplification for about 4 or 5 years before that, okay, and finally decided I might as well write about it and submitted the paper. But about halfway through this presentation, one German engineer in the audience stood up and shouted, "It won't work." Then to make matters worse, his friend who was sitting next to him, another German engineer, jumped up and he said, "If it works, the power company would be using it." Now, the audience there is trying to decide, was this a bogus white paper or what, And it totally stopped my presentation. And, you're a young guy and, you've been doing this and it works, okay? So, that was kind of, you just like talking to everybody and you stop dead. Well, fortunately, when the second engineer spoke, I realized that they were thinking in terms of power frequencies of 50 hertz or 60 hertz, depending where you were in Europe, and not the wide range of frequencies that music is composed of. So after explaining this, they better understood the basic bi and tri and quad amp concepts, which work for all our frequencies. I was again invited to present this technical white paper at the Los Angeles convention and later in May 1972. I fortunately didn't have any people in the audience then that were from the power company, and it worked. And today the concept of bi and tri amplification is standard in the professional audio industry and accepted by everyone. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't use it unless you're talking about some speaker in your living room. In the mid-'70s, there was a revolution in the touring business that I want to sort of remember here. The Columbia Motion Picture lot in Hollywood was standing empty. And a couple of forward-thinking engineers realized this was a gold mine. And so for the first time, a tour would be able to rehearse and finally go on the road as a finished product. This was really a landmark moment for us. The Columbia lot at Hollywood became the Disneyland of rock and roll. Elton John, David Bowie, the Doobie Brothers, Fleetwood Mac, and others immediately recognized this and they moved in. SIR opened their largest store on the site. The record companies, graphic design companies, management companies, a newsletter, a restaurant, and most importantly, sound, lighting, and staging companies opened their office there. And A1 Audio was one of these innovators. We had a shop that was in the camera shop. We took over the camera shop and the sound stage next to it. We shared a sound stage with a company that developed the technology that put Elvis Presley around the world via satellite from Hawaii. And this is where A1 introduced the VIP touring systems. And VIP, of course, had a double meaning, but for us it meant vertically integrated power. Okay? And this is where we started experimenting with aligning loudspeakers and drivers to obtain the coupling effects found in today's line arrays. We encased the back of the horns in foam to eliminate the ringing. Just as he said, we align the drivers to increase the throw and focus sound like line arrays. We developed the hardware to quickly array the loudspeakers. We mounted the amplifiers in the back of the loudspeakers. And of course, the systems were tri-amplified with electronic crossovers at the front of house. We protected the drivers with individual fuses, a limiting circuit, and a sharp 20 hertz low frequency cutoff to eliminate the stage rumble. For all this activity, I received an endless amount of doubts and grief concerning all these concepts. And frankly, all a pioneer gets is an ass full of arrows, as someone once said. And especially on the mounting of the power amps in the speaker cabinets. I explained that we had much less power loss than 2 feet of cable versus 200 feet of cable. You have an order of magnitude there. And we dramatically improved the damping factor. It just sounded better. And today, powered speakers are widely accepted. I want to offer many thanks to all the forward-thinking performers like Paul who had faith in us. I want to thank you, Chips Davis and Hank Catania, for having faith in my ideas. I thank you, John and Helen Meyer and others, for producing bi and tri-amp self-powered loudspeakers. You are one of the first that used these concepts. I want to thank La Acoustics because I visited their factory with my son this summer, and I really enjoyed their operation and their setup. They have a beautiful setup outside of Paris. I want to thank Larry Itali of Yamaha. I remember when you were a rep calling on us. You are now running Yamaha and truly know what good reliability and support means to all of us. I want to especially thank David Sherman of JBL, who's a real worldwide touring engineer, for guiding JBL to keep making great products and great transducers. And especially David for writing articles about A1 Audio, which you saw some of them up there on the thing, which led me to meet my dear wife, Holly, an artist at Recording Engineer Producer magazine. Thank you, Holly, for putting up with all my travels and late nights and coming home at 4 in the morning after the shows and packing stuff up and so on. I have two wonderful children, Abby and Gabe, who are both in college and involved in the arts. Gabe with classical piano, business and law, and Abby studying fine arts where design matters. I want to thank you, Michael and Terry Kaplan, for being such longtime friends and boating buddies that got me in the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. And I want to thank you, Gary Barnbaum, for keeping my business life in order for many years. And thank you, Mary Chu, so dear Mary Chu, for running the Audio Freak Facebook site for our past employees and engineers. I want to thank Kevin Hall and Tony Alamia and Aaron James for keeping our company, A1 Entertainment Services, on track today and functioning with all the latest technology that's available. Finally, I stand in front of all of you now as a proud father figure to many of the engineers who have passed through A1 Audio over the years and gone on to really greater successes of making the world sound better. Assisting others in obtaining their goals has always been and will really always be the most enjoyable part of my life. After all, this is really what allows all of us to grow from amateurs to professionals. We respected and we helped one another, and that's really why it all worked. We all really did it our way, and my heartfelt thanks again to all of you, Thank you, Terry and Patrick, and the most gracious Parnelli advisors and their staffs. Thank you.